Hastings Hart.
The distributions continued for 75 years, until 1929.
It was a huge stage, and we were all set up there in 2 rows of semicircle. And the people were already down in the audience. They had been notified ahead the day before that we would be there.
The big day came, and we arrived on a Sunday in Kirksville, Missouri, at the Presbyterian Church. We marched down the aisle, 13 of us, and they would walk past us, and you were viewed. And that's a strange feeling. You'd never been looked at in that way before. You'd never seen people looking all around you.
That was an ordeal that no child should go through. They pulled us and pushed us and shoved us. And this old man, I had never seen anything like anybody chewing tobacco. I knew nothing about it. This old man came up and his mouth was all stained brown. And I thought, well, he'd been eating chocolate candy or something. Then he said, open your mouth. I looked at him. And he said, I want to see about your teeth. I opened my mouth. He stuck his finger in my mouth and rubbed over my teeth. And his old dirty hands just, I wanted to bite, but I didn't.
The local minister, banker, doctor, and other leading citizens were asked by the Children's Aid Society to form a committee to check qualifications of potential foster parents. An agent explained the society's rules to the crowd. All placements were to be made on a trial basis. Legal adoption was not required. Dissatisfied children could leave. Those who stayed were expected to work as contributing members of the household. The foster parents were asked to house, feed, and educate the New York children in the same manner as their own. Brace's system put its faith in the kindness of strangers.
Well, I lived on the farm out west, and my uncle was a doctor in Denton, and I went in to see him that day, and he says, I was down, they called me last night, down at Davis's rooming house. They had a bunch of children down there, and one of them was sick. He said, they've got those children to find homes, give them homes. He said, if I was you, I'd go down there and get one of those boys. He could be a big help to you as he grew up, and you could be a big help to him. And I went down, and the lady said, now here they all are. There's 8 or 10 in that row. Different kinds and different expressions, and all different places they'd come from. Some from Italy, some from other countries. And they was all, and they just let me pick the one I wanted. This little sharp-eyed boy, I said, I'll take that one. And they fixed him up and had a little bundle of clothes, and we took him home. And I was 19, and he was 9, I think.
I wasn't very comfortable up on that stage because I didn't know where I was going to go. And I was old enough to realize that there could be a lot of mistakes made. A farmer came up to me, and he felt of my muscles, and he says, Joel, you'd make a good hand on the farm. And I says, well, I'm not going to go home with you. I says, you smell too bad. You haven't had a bath probably in a year. And he took me by the arm and was going to lead me off the stage, and I bit him. And that didn't work, so I kicked him. And so everybody in the audience thought I was incorrigible. They didn't want me because I was out of control. I was crying there in the chair by myself, and a school teacher came up there, and she says, I'd like to take you home with me and play with my boy for a week, and if nobody wants you then, well, then we'll have to send you back to New York. But this elderly couple in their 60s were contacted by this school teacher, and they had no children, never did have. They had a stillborn about 30 years previous. So he put me on his lap in this school teacher's home and got acquainted with me. And he said, if you go home with me, I'll buy you a pony and a bicycle and a puppy. So I thought that was great. So I went home with them, and I finally got the best home of the whole bunch. But I always thought that biting and kicking did me a lot of good. The best day of my life.
He was a little Italian, still had a little of that Italian talk. Well, he was great. We was in a buggy. We had to get him in our buggy and go 18 miles to our farm. He enjoyed sitting down there holding those lines. Of course, the horse done most of the driving anyway. And we got out on that farm. He'd never been on a farm. He thinks all that's the world to him. He saw chickens and hogs and sheep and everything. And somebody gave him a little old pup, after a year or two, an Airedale dog. And of course, he thought he was a rich man having a dog. No children have him in New York. It was interesting to see him, the city ways he had, and put him in the country.
We got to the house, and this nice old lady met me and says, "You look all right." Well, they had already had their supper, so she fixed a plate for me and this big goblet of milk. And I tasted it, and I said, "It's sour." She heard it. She could hear that. She said, "It is not. I churned it fresh this morning." Well, I still didn't know what she was talking about. I said, "I don't like it." She said, "You don't have to have it." Anyway, she took the glass away, and her daughter-in-law was waiting for her husband to come out because the war was over now, and her husband was stationed at Langley Field, Virginia. And he wouldn't be home soon. So I could sleep with her that night. And that was really a night. She told me just exactly why those people wanted me, that she would be gone. And I was growing up, and I would be big enough to take care of that house. And that's all they wanted with me. But she wouldn't be there to help me. And I said, "What can I do?" She says, "Go back to the hotel. Just tell them that this is just not for you." So she drew me a map of where I was, back to the Beckham. And I walked in, and I never got such dirty looks in my life as I did when they saw me walk in that door. "Well, what happened to you?" And I said, "They didn't want a child, they wanted a slave."
The children whom no one selected were escorted back to the train and taken to the next stop on the line.
By that time, there was some 20, maybe 25 children left on the train, along with my brothers and I. And we eventually wound up in a little town down in deep northeast Texas called Clarksville, Texas. And we were lined up again there and examined and everything. And a couple came by, picked up Gerald, who was only 2.5 years old. I don't suppose the child had ever been shown any love or anything, because when the lady bent over to talk to him and everything, he just almost jumped in her arms, and you could see him grab her around the neck. And so they decided to take Gerald. There again, I felt terrible because I knew I was losing a brother right there. And they took Gerald over to the table, did the paperwork, and he was just happy as he could be until they started out the door, and he suddenly realized that he was losing his brothers, and he turned around and screamed right loud for his brothers. And of course, that broke my heart again.
Next morning, the door of the room opened up, and 2 men were standing in the doorway, and one of them, I started here and looked up like that, and I thought I would never quit looking. That was, I thought, the biggest man I ever saw in my life. Probably was. It was my dad. Would be my foster dad. And he said, "May we come in?" And the matron said, "Oh, yes, come on." She said, "This is Hazel sitting right here on the floor." says, "Get up, Hazel, and shake hands." And I got up. And he says, "You're going to be my little girl." And I says, "If you ever hit me, I'll never get up." He says, "Dear, I'll never hit you. I'll never hit you." And he never did. He never did.
Children were sent to Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Kansas, and Texas. 47 states in all. They were taken to sod houses and cabins, to large farmhouses and shopkeepers' homes in town. From the very beginning, many of these placements made so hastily did not go according to plan.
Julia McCann came to us with very erroneous ideas. She expected to be taken care of by rich people.
I had your son for about 3 months, and he did not suit me. So I gave him up to Mr. Gilson, and he gave him to a good farmer, and the farmer could not keep him.
We farmers can hardly imagine how it is that these boys can be so awkward on a farm. I have promised to give them a horse apiece if they will stay and be good boys. I fear that they will run away.
Children drifted from farm to farm. Some even made their way back to New York. There were stories of children landing in reform school in Michigan. From Indiana, rumors of children on the dole. A Southerner named J.H. Mills claimed that men needing labor, their slaves being set free, take these boys and treat them as slaves.
There was one boy, I refused to go home with this farmer too. He took this other boy, Albert, maybe I shouldn't name him, but, and they kept him on the farm, wouldn't send him to school, worked him 18 hours a day in the field, and he just lost his mind. And he died at an early age, less than 30 years of age. And he finally ran away from home. But it was too late. They wouldn't let him go to town and see people, afraid he'd tell them how badly he was treated. And he never saw anybody. I saw him about 2 times during the whole time he was there, about 10 years. I just saw him twice. And he was afraid to talk to me. And I couldn't help him. I didn't know enough to help him. But my dad always thought that he was abused, so he was afraid to talk about it, afraid he'd be abused some more.
The record books are filled with names and dates, details of departures and arrivals, but say little about the quality of the children's treatment. The extent of abuse is unknown. The Society's goal was to visit each child once a year, but there were only a handful of agents to monitor thousands of placements. With reports of children drifting through the countryside, Brace consented in 1883 to an independent investigation. It found the local committees were ineffective at screening foster parents. Supervision was lax. Many older boys had run away. But its overall conclusion was positive. The majority of children under 14 were leading satisfactory lives.
Dear Mr. Brace, when I lived in New York, I had no bonnet, and now I have more bonnets than I can wear. And I get no whippings, and I have a father and mother and brothers and sisters here, and they are kinder to me than my own ever were. I think I will never be happier than I am now.
In New York, the children of a new generation of immigrants were facing deprivation and homelessness. Brace continued to insist that removal from the city was the street children's best hope for deliverance. He used photographs like these, made by his protege Jacob Riis, to dramatize their plight. The society boasted about the story of two street kids, Andrew Burke and John Brady, who were sent to the same Indiana town on the same day. On arrival, the judge who adopted Brady considered him the homeliest, toughest, most unpromising boy in the whole lot. He said, "I had a curious desire to see what could be made of such a specimen of humanity." John Brady grew up to be governor of Alaska. His friend Andrew Burke grew up to be governor of North Dakota. But many rural people viewed the orphan-trained children with suspicion, as incorrigible offspring of drunkards and prostitutes. The children spoke with the accents of Ireland, Germany, and Italy. Unlike most Midwesterners, many were Catholic. One official said, what was good for New York was very bad for the West.
I have known several of these city Arabs being provided with homes and never heard of but one that proved to be honest. I believe it is the blood and not the education that tells.
Bad blood. That's what they used to consider it. We kids from New York were of inferior stock. Bad blood is what's running through those veins. And some people have bad blood and others have blue blood. Well, the bad blood is supposed to carry the bad things down from your parents through your life. All the bad things are supposed to come through that bad blood. And you don't have a chance to do better.
The first day of school, they took me to the third grade. I could hear whispers among the kids that there's an orphan, and he's going to be in our class. And they say, you don't know what his background is. And they kind of dodged me, and they say, well, he's an orphan. We don't want to have anything to do with him. Because they wasn't used to that. They were farming families and well-knit families, most of them, and they didn't have that kind of trouble.
You know, I was never invited to birthday parties. I would see other children going to birthday parties, and it really hurt. Children didn't want me. They didn't want to play with me. And I remember possibly in the 4th grade when I was walking with this girl, and this mother came at the screen door and she said, haven't I told you I don't want you to walk with her? I don't want you to talk to her. Get away from her. And that's the way it was. It was very hurtful because sometimes I'd go home and look in the mirror. What was the matter with me? I didn't know. Somehow those people, the ones I went to school with, knew that I was a bastard.
The children expressed their hopes, fears, and loneliness in letters they wrote to Brace and his colleagues.
Elkhart, Indiana, May 28, 1865. Dear friend, the place where I lived I did not like. They whipped me till I was all black and blue. I told the lady I did not like to stay there. So she told me I might leave. I have a good place now. I hope you will write to me and let me know if you see any of my folks in New York. I would give 100 worlds like this if I could see my mother. Katie Murphy.
Annie Williams was sent to live in this house in Battle Creek, Michigan. An Irish orphan, she'd been discovered by one of Brace's agents, sleeping in a doorway near the New York docks. Brace visited Annie while on a field trip to the Midwest. She later wrote him this letter.
January 12th, 1862. Dear Mr. Brace, it is rather pleasant today for winter weather. I go to school and enjoy myself first rate. I would like to teach school when I get a good education. But sometimes I have a great deal of trouble and woe. I build many air castles, and before they are entirely constructed, they tumble down in a heap of ruins. I suppose we must take life's journey as it comes. Annie Williams.
You didn't think about the years ahead of time. You're trying to think a day ahead of time, and you live in hopes that the good will come, but you doubt it at the same time. Anyways, the Nailings took me in, and they took me, gave me a room of my own that was almost unbelievable for anyone to have, a boy that age, to have a room of their own. The next morning, we went in for a huge breakfast, and the breakfast was set in the main dining room, which was an honor, and the prayer was most gratifying, and it gave me a new thought on life, that maybe this wasn't so bad after all, that I'd kind of wait and see how things worked out.
You have to have something deep inside of you that will make you want to keep going. When I went to school, they had a game. They played send in and send out was the name of it, and the width of the playground, they would line up and they'd go after people. Well, they wanted fast runners. So I started running home and running back to school and running. Wherever I went, I was running. And one day I finally talked them into, please let me play. Just please, just once let me play and go after somebody. That was all it took. I was in 6th grade. After that, they fought over who got me because I could catch anybody there was.
Nobody seemed to want to keep me very long. I was shuffled from one home to another for many months until I finally was placed with the Carmens. That's me, and that's my calf. I made pets out of all the calves, that they just tagged me everywhere. I really had a wonderful time. They were so good to me, and as far as having a wonderful family, I was one of the lucky. They were always there for me when I needed them, always.
Danville, Indiana, June 5th, 1865. You wanted to know if John Ryer is with me. He is with me, and always will be. If he were our own son, we could not love him more than we do. We have given him our name. We call him Charlie Hyland. He thinks we are his parents, and we want him to. I love him so much that it would break my heart to part with him. Mrs. Sally Hyland.
My adopted mother, Miss Nailing, she lived with a horror that I would eventually go back to New York to my biological people. And, of course, after 2 or 3 years with them, that was just past thinking, because I was happy where I was. And I don't imagine I would have gone back if I'd have had the chance. But even after I was grown, she had that horror.
I remember my mother hiding a letter one time from the Dr. Hoffman, wanted to know if I was happy and well cared for and all. And she put it up on top of a corner shelf, and it stayed up there, I guess, for 10 or 12 years.
When I got the letter that my mother had died, I just felt like the door had closed. I just walked out of the house, walked down the road. It was cotton picking time. Daddy said I could stay at the house. So I did, but I didn't cry. I just felt, well, It's the end of something. And there was always that hope that she would get better and I would get a letter, or maybe she would come. Somehow or other, I still had that hope.
Nobody can understand the loneliness that an orphan feels. It's a loneliness. You just don't know who you are. You don't know where you come from. So there's that with combination that if you could just only have known your biological mother, if you just could have seen her.
As far as I have been able to research my biological mother, never made an inquiry. You'd have thought maybe there'd have been a little ache in her heart to wonder whatever happened to me. And if I die, should be fortunate enough to go to heaven. And if I saw her in heaven, I guess I would speak and say, and extend a hand and say, my name is Lorraine and you're Marguerite, aren't you? I would not say, I am your daughter. I would leave that up there to her to put two and two together. And unless she had a comment, I believe I would walk on. Because the true mother and dad who loved me, cared for me in sickness and in health, were the ones that cared so much that they legally adopted me. They loved me and they were my mother and my father, and I think they are the only two ones that should be called rightfully mother and father.
It hurt awfully bad being separated from my family. But as I got older and realized I would have never stood a chance if they had left me in that environment, I would have never gotten to do anything I was capable of. By them picking me up and moving me clear away from it, as bad as it was afterwards, I got a chance to do what I was capable of doing. Making something myself, being a good mother.
I think he looked on me as a father. I feel like he did, and my wife as a mother. And we went through life together. He has passed away, I think he's 72 years old. And I was always, and still am, glad that I did that. One thing, to take that boy and raise him.
This is the picture. This is the knickers and the high-lace boots and the blouse that I wore on the train. And this is the picture I first had. I was 8.5 then. I'd been with my parents for 6 months, and they dressed me up for the picture. My mother wanted it when I was all dressed up so she could show it to her relatives. She just wanted to show me off. My father couldn't wait till he could buy me my first pony. He just went all over the country trying to find a pony for me. He was a very successful merchant. He owned a hardware store, the president of the bank, and he owned 2 farms. I never did work on a farm. He never asked me to. I never had a spanking. Never had a spanking of any kind or a correction. My dad would put me on his lap and say, I want you to be a good boy, and you made some mistakes today, and I want you to be a good citizen. And he never did spank me, but it got next to me, you know. He wanted to give me a good start. The kindness is what got next to me. He saved my life. I tried to live the life that Alvin Bobo wanted me to live. and I think I have.
The orphan train program was widely imitated. 40,000 children were sent to Catholic communities by a religious order, the Sisters of Charity. And organizations in Boston, Philadelphia, and Chicago relocated thousands more. When Charles Loring Brace died in 1890, he was acclaimed as the most influential child saver of the 19th century. But in the 20th century, America's vision of childhood was changing. The emphasis was shifting from the virtues of work to the benefits of play, from children's economic value to their emotional needs. On May 31st, 1929, the Children's Aid Society sent 3 boys to Sulphur Springs, Texas. It was the last of the orphan trains. Back when he began, Brace said, "When a child of the streets stands before you in rags, with tear-stained face, you cannot easily forget him. And yet you are perplexed what to do. The human soul is difficult to interfere with. You hesitate how far you should go."
A production of WGBH Boston. Major funding for the American Experience is provided by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation to enhance public understanding of the role of technology in American society, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and the annual financial support of viewers like you.
And by Miracle Grow plant food. For flowers, for vegetables, whatever you grow, a gardener's true friend is Miracle Grow.
Major funding for this program was provided by the